Welcome back, everyone. Spring and summer is a time for new growth and taking bold action together. So we hope these stories can inspire you to live boldly, take wise chances, and with our friends and family, make a difference together. Today we will be reading A Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, retold by Billy Aronson. So as we lean in with the spirit of adventure, grab a friend, like Jade here, and let's enjoy the story together. Looking back on everything that happened, I can hardly believe it wasn't all a dream. Even now I'm amazed when I remember the incredible adventure that began on that fateful day. The day I'm talking about, of course, is the day my uncle got the idea for our historic journey. My uncle, better known as Professor Lindenbrock, was a famous professor of geology, the science that deals with how the earth was formed and what it's made of. One of the finest geologists of the day, my uncle had analyzed hundreds of different types of rocks and shared his findings with great scientists around the world. Since I, too, was interested in geology, I had come to live with my uncle at his home in Hamburg, Germany. There we could study and discover day after day. On this particular morning, I was examining rocks in my uncle's laboratory as he did research in his library upstairs. At lunchtime, I headed to the kitchen where our cook had set out a fine meal. But just as I was about to take my first slurp of soup, I was interrupted by a shriek from upstairs. "Axel, Axel," my uncle cried, "come up here at once, hurry up." When I got up to my uncle's library, he was holding a large, dusty book with yellowed pages. Taking no notice of me, my uncle just stood there, staring into the volume. Then he began tapping his forehead and muttering to himself, "Wonderful, wonderful!" Normally I'm very interested in my uncle's findings, but at this moment, I was much more interested in the bowl of soup waiting for me in the kitchen. Axel is my kind of storyteller. The tale just started and he's already talking about food. Like this one. When my uncle finally put down the volume, I realized that it wasn't the book itself he had been studying. It was a small, crinkled note he had found between the pages. "Runic, my boy," he said, referencing to the strange lettering that covered the note, "a language with an unusual alphabet used in Iceland, Finland, and Germany between the 4th and 14th centuries. Though my uncle understood dozens of different languages, he knew as many letters of the runic alphabet as I did. None. But he wasn't going to let that stop him from reading that ancient scribble. In a flash, he climbed onto a stepladder, yanked his trusty runic dictionary from the bookshelves, and began trying to translate the message. I stood there as patiently as I could as he began to translate. How I hoped his stomach would cry out to him as mine was crying out to me. "Ooh, mine is crying out too!" But I had no such luck. When the clock struck 2, the cook called up to remind us that lunch was getting quite cold. "Who needs lunch?" replied my uncle, without even lifting his eyes from his book. For the next 3 minutes, my love of politeness battled with my love of food. Finally, the love of food won out. I charged downstairs and devoured my soup, not minding that it was cold, as well as a ham omelet and 2 helpings of stew, before rinsing off an apple for dessert. As I was finishing the apple, I heard my uncle call my name so loudly that I nearly sprang up the stairs in a single leap. "It's in code," he declared. "These letters are indeed runic, I'm sure of that, but they don't spell any particular words. It must be in code. It must be some sort of secret message." I was about to ask whether this message might not just be a lot of nonsense when my uncle handed me a pen. "Sit down," he commanded. "Write these letters as I dictate to you." One at a time, he translated from the runic as I wrote down the odd string of letters. I'm not going to read the letters to you because it's a lot of random letters, but you get the gist. Here, I'll show you. A lot of letters. A coded message, as sure as I live and breathe, he examined. "But from whom?" he asked. "The book was written in the 12th century, but the paper on which the note is written isn't nearly as old as the pages of the book, so the note clearly is not from the person who wrote that book, but from someone who owned it." With that, my uncle flipped to the inside front cover of the book, where he found written in tiny letters a name that made him gasp. "Arne Saknussemm." "Who?" I asked. "Arne Saknussemm," my uncle cried again. "The great 16th century Icelandic explorer. The note must have been written by him. I'm positive it contains news of a discovery made by the great Saknussemm himself." "It might," I said, "but why would an explorer write a discovery in code? Wouldn't he want the world to know what he'd found? Why would he go to so much trouble to keep it secret?" "How should I know?" answered my uncle, pacing wildly around the room. "But until I figure out what his note says, I will neither eat nor sleep." "No eating or sleeping? I'm going to have a serious talk with this guy." "But uncle," I began. "And neither will you," he added. I suddenly felt lucky that I'd had an extra helping of stew at lunch. Let's see, he muttered, studying the letters. There are 40 vowels, 69 consonants. Nothing unusual about that. This phrase at the bottom row of the letters looks strangely familiar. Tididi. Could there be the name of a tropical island somewhere? And look here, in the row above it, the word for. But for what? I wonder. For red? For red? For reds? Very challenging indeed, eh, Axel? What was challenging to my uncle was becoming downright boring to me. My mind had already wandered to thoughts of his goddaughter Gretchen, to whom I was engaged to be married. My dear Gretchen had been away on vacation and was due back within the hour. How I longed to see her smile again. How I longed to see anything outside the walls of this library, where my uncle was keeping me prisoner. Let's try it this way, my uncle barked. He wrote quickly, copying the letters onto another piece of paper. As he copied, he arranged the horizontal rows of letters into vertical columns. Then he stood, stared at his new version of the message, and suddenly exclaimed, "Nothing! Still nothing!" He struck the table with his fist, darted out of the room, and right out of the house. All right, that's it for chapter 1. We'll see you next time.